Hi everybody, hi Theo. Welcome to another video comparing Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones, and I really like this video now. We're gonna talk about magic swords. No fantasy story is complete without a magic sword. No, not now Theo, not now. Yes.
Swords exemplify the medieval warrior. They're associated with dueling, honor, status. You know, the sword is the soul of the warrior. Ruling. They're like of the ruling class. If you carried a sword, you were of the ruling class.
So let's talk a little bit about swords in A Song of Ice and Fire and Game of Thrones. Go ahead. Let's do it. Let's do it. Are you ready?
Alrighty.
Okay, and then go for it.
Well, there's Valerian swords are the most famous swords.
Of course. Magic forged in the Doom, in the whatever volcanoes of Valyria. You can't make them anymore because it was lost.
To some families in Westeros, they have they have Valerian steel still.
Which are stronger and faster. Not now. Not yet.
So the first sword we see is, well, it's in the opening where we see Ned's two-handed behemoth ice.
Right.
Right.
And he like.
Guys, all right, enough. Gatsby, enough. I have a magic sword. Stop.
I'm actually afraid of knives and swords. This is true.
This is true. It's really dull.
Can I sue you if I get
Pull
cut?
that way. Yeah.
Okay. So shh.
For Ned, ice is an instrument of justice. He uses it in the opening to behead the deserter of the Night's Watch.
Right.
And then, in the end, when it's Ned's terms, in his end, the King's headsman, Ian Payne, uses it to knock Ned's head off.
Right.
Yeah.
So it becomes an instrument of injustice.
Of injustice,
it's a nice arc for a sword.
The way Ned describes it is why he uses his sword, right? Is he who passes the sentence should swing the sword. It's entwined with justice. Right. That it be you, because if you hide behind paid headsmen, you soon forget what death is. So then that comes full circle when Ned is executed by a paid headsman.
For Joffrey.
For Joffrey.
And then Joffrey gets a piece of this sword, of this same sword.
And then Joffrey gets the sword. He gets a piece of the sword. But the sword is then melted down by Tywin, and it's divided into two. There's Widow's Wail.
For Joffrey.
Yeah, the Joffrey's
and the Oathkeeper.
Sword, and then Oathkeeper, right?
For Jaime,
Right, so this dichotomy is maintained in a sense in the next incarnation of the swords.
That's very smart. And also, I think melting down the sword is kind of a symbol of ultimate victory. But then it's also a symbol of respect for the sword and what it means.
Well, look at the Iron Throne. It's a bunch of swords melted down as a symbol of authority.
Exactly. It's very smart.
Just thought of that.
Okay, there's also another famous Valyrian sword in the story, Longclaw by Jon Snow. He has been given that sword from Mormont, Lord Commander Mormont, right? Because his son is a douche.
Right. Well, the sigil is a bear, so their sword is called Longclaw.
That makes sense.
And sure, so he gives Jon the sword, their sigil is the wolf, and they say, yeah, just keep the name.
That doesn't make sense.
Because wolves have paws. Because we're in modern English, let's call it Long Paw now. Let's just name change, Long Paw.
It's not that scary, not that intimidating. This is Long Paw. You can see cats here with paws.
So Longclaw was passed, but it was an acknowledgement of Jon saving Jorah's life.
Right.
Or no, Jorah Mormont. The Lord Commander Mormont's life. I called him Jorah.
Mormont Senior.
Mormont Senior's life.
Right.
So it was an acknowledgement of honor, respect.
Right. And then also in the books they mention that they make this big deal out of another Valyrian sword called the Dorn, right? The Dawn.
The sword of mourning carries.
Right. They talk about it all the time. What the fuck cares?
Right. So Sir Arthur Dayne, the sword of mourning, used the sword Dawn to protect Ned's sister from Ned.
That's weird.
Yeah, I don't know why they didn't have like a quick conversation before that.
Right.
Just be like,
do you think that I'm going to kill my own sister? Come on, I like my sister. Go and ask her.
Okay, so you're not going to hurt your sister? All right, cool, then let's not fight.
Right, and then I'll stay alive.
Okay, that's cool. Then we all live. That's cool.
Right,
Let's
it's
do that.
better.
Yeah, I like that.
I like that. But it's not very George R. Martini, I would guess. People being alive and things being better.
So Dawn is made from very mysterious material, possibly a meteorite.
Really? It's like the last year there was like this news whatever report that it was found out that a king, like an ancient Egyptian king, his sword was made by a very rare, like a strange metal that came from a meteorite.
Well, if I found a meteorite, that's the first thing I'd do.
Make a sword out of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I can see that you're really big into swords. That's okay. So even back then, back in the day, they ascribed like special meaning to a magic sword, to a special sword.
Magic swords go deep, deep, deep in mythology. They're often associated with ultimate power or authority. Going back to the sword of Damocles, right? Which is a sort of metaphor for the treachery of power, in that the sword hangs over his head. It's similar to Martin's Iron Throne, where some kings even impaled themselves on the throne. It was so dangerous because of all the swords.
And the throne is a symbol of power.
But the most famous sword that's synonymous with power and the right to rule is Excalibur.
Right.
So
from King Arthur.
From King Arthur. So there's few incarnations of the tale of how the sword appears to Arthur. One is the Lady of the Lake throws it at him, and he gets it that way.
I haven't heard of that one.
Yeah.
What about the famous one is with the rock, the stone?
The famous one is that he draws the sword from the stone, right? And in both of those, it speaks to the sort of the land sort of consenting to be ruled to the king. So the stone and the lake, these are elements of the land. They give them
eternal.
Yeah. A sort of primal right to rule. But then, as the stories evolved and the Arthurian myth evolved with Christianity, the sword and the stone appears in a churchyard.
Huh.
So
that's convenient.
Convenient. So when Arthur draws the sword from the stone, it's an acknowledgement of divine providence, that he is destined to rule. He has the authority of God. He is confirmed by divine right to be king.
To be king. And can you see any parallels between not this sword, the Excalibur sword?
Does that make you more comfortable?
Yes, thank you. So can you see any parallels between Excalibur and any sword in the Song of Ice and Fire?
Of course, Lightbringer.
Lightbringer. That was like the sword of Azor Ahai, right? He used it to kill the bad guys way back when.
Right. He forged it. There's this great mythology behind how he forged it. So he tried to temper the steel in water and it broke.
Okay.
And then he tried to temper it in the heart of a lion and it broke.
Okay.
Then he said, I guess I got to drive it through the heart of my wife. And then it worked.
So, okay, so it was like police were coming, you're under arrest, you're under arrest. No, I was doing it because I had to kill the bad guys.
Yeah, the long night. You can't, hey, sorry.
Right, you can't arrest me.
My wife, I love her, actually. This makes a lot of sense. Trust me, guys. This makes a lot of sense.
So now Lightbringer is supposed to come again. Right, like Melisandre says that Stannis, he has the Lightbringer, he has the Excalibur, and this is what proves that he is Azor Ahai and he is supposed to rule by divine right.
It is right. Excalibur, the once and future king, it is always a herald of the future king as well, the return of the king.
Right, it's eternal.
Yeah. So Stannis has a Lightbringer.
Right, so he will be the king now.
He would be king, but it's fake.
Right.
And we know this because it doesn't, I don't know, it glows, but there's no heat.
Right. And we know that Melisandre can do some tricks that are not real.
She's tricky,
whatever.
that one.
And we also get a clue when Stannis is dead that he's not going to be king. I don't know. Maybe that's just me overthinking it.
Right, but he hasn't killed Stannis yet.
Yeah, he will. Okay, so do you see any parallels between Excalibur and any sword in Lord of the Rings?
Of course, the Narsil.
Incredible.
Narsil.
That's the guy.
It's the shards of Isildur's sword.
It's not Anduil?
Well, Anduil is the sword before it was broken.
It has a new name now that it's broken.
Now that it's broken, they changed the name.
Wow. Yeah. So, okay, that's interesting. It goes to show how Tolkien treated his mythical story very seriously.
The naming of things, language is very important, right? So the symbolism of reforging the sword is just like the symbolism of Arthur, you know, sort of pulling the sword from the stone. That it's, you know, it's this kind of uniting the kingdom under the authority of the king.
Right, and the fact that Aragorn has this sword, and he actually, not so differently from you, walks around with the sword all the time and wants to show people the sword. This is a little bit different in the movies. Can you see my sword? This is a very special sword.
It's very different.
It's very different.
It's very different.
And when people see the sword, they react and say, "Ah, okay, so something extraordinary is going on. It's not just a sword for them."
Right. When Aragorn has a moment where he wants to intimidate Sauron by showing him the sword, that he knows Sauron's looking, he shows him the sword reforged, and
the sword so he knows that took his ring the last time.
Oh.
So just to show how important the sword is in the story, like Aragorn and his family, they've been away like for 1,000 years, and new rulers have been like the stewards, whatever, and he comes back with a sword, and they just have to say, "Oh shit. He has the sword. Come on, he has a sword. What can we do? We have to go. My father and my grandfather and my grand-grandfather and 1,000 years, we were the rulers, but a sword."
He has a sword. We have swords. They have swords, but it's not that sword.
It's not that sword.
It's not that sword.
Right. So. Basically, the sword maybe is the only tangible thing that holds Aragorn's line together. If he had lost this sword, like he has to have like a physical thing to prove who he is and to prove he's right.
In all these stories, the magic sword represents a claim to power.
Right. Okay, so can we use that to make a bold prediction for A Song of Fire and Fire? Lord of the Rings, not so much, because we already know the end. There, the sword has allowed Aragorn to rule, to be the one king, to be a good king. What about Lightbringer? Maybe Lightbringer is Longclaw. Maybe John has the Narsil, which he has to turn into Anduril some way, maybe temper it in some blood. He has maybe to kill someone.
Sansa. Daenerys.
Daenerys. Maybe he has to kill Daenerys. He will find out she's his sister, his twin. Boom. That's not good.
Maybe
that's not good. It's blinking.
He's not going to play by the tropes. So if you see something happen in Tolkien, you know that he's going to do it differently.
Right.
Right. He's going to try to upset the expectation.
Right. But the sword is there.
The sword is there, and the lore behind the sword is so specific. You know it's going to be reenacted in some way.
Right. So probably it won't be reenacted in a way that the person who is Azor Ahai will also rule the world and be a good and just king.
For the rest of his days.
Right. Probably not.
Probably not. Wouldn't it be cool if Daenerys was Azor Ahai and she had to plunge it into Jon's heart?
It would not be cooler. It would not. Okay, so let's wrap it up. I'm sorry, Theo, it was just like a crappy theory. So if you enjoyed the video, please click like. It was a very good video. It was a very good theory. If you want to keep seeing our videos about Lord of the Rings, you should definitely subscribe and support us on Patreon.